Sometimes the quickest route to dinner is to saute a tender piece of protein. And when you're done cooking the protein, you're all set up to make a speedy pan sauce. There are so many variations on these sautés, you could have a different dinner every night of the week. I'm starting with a pork cutlet. I'll show you how to pound and saute it, then give you an easy Hungarian sauce. The pork with its creamy sauce is served with homemade Spaetzle and some sautéed spinach. And fish is the perfect candidate for a fast sauté. My blackened fish with Creole spices is terrific with shredded zucchini and smashed potatoes. 15-minute sautés. That's today on Sara's Weeknight Meals. Funding provided by
Family owned and Indiana grown, Maple Leaf Farms is a proud sponsor of Sara's Weeknight Meals. Providing a variety of duck products for home kitchens, Maple Leaf Farms Duck helps inspire culinary adventures everywhere. Maple Leaf Farms.
Subaru builds vehicles like the versatile Subaru Forester with symmetrical all-wheel drive and plenty of cargo room. A recipe made for whatever the day brings. Subaru, a proud sponsor of Sara's Weeknight Meals.
Ezra's Feta Cheese, family made for more than a century.
I'd like to get some pork chops, about a pound, but I need them boneless. You have them boneless?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good, great. Okay, great. I think I have 10 cents.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Sara Moulton. Welcome to Sara's Weeknight Meals. Now we're making 15-minute sautés tonight, and there's no better sauté to know than the quick meat sauté with a pan sauce. So I'm going to make a specific recipe, but I want you to see it as a template for all sorts of quick meat sautés with sauce. So I'm going to start by chopping some shallots here. We're making Hungarian pork cutlets, and I'm also going to make a really cool fresh pasta called spätzle. I'm going to start by chopping a shallot. You could certainly use an onion. This is going to be part of our pan sauce. So those are my shallots, and now I'm going to show you, because when you do a sauté like this, it helps. The thinner the meat, the faster it cooks, the more tender it is. These are fairly affordable too, these boneless pork chops. So there we go, there's the lineup. So I'm going to use a resealable plastic bag. I put water in there. I'm going to put my pork in there. I'm going to get it wet, and then I'm going to pound. Now what the water does is it keeps the pork from sticking to the plastic and shredding. This is a very good thing to do after a bad day at the office. I do need to say one thing, which is if you do get a little too enthusiastic and you end up with a bit of a hole, do not despair, because the great thing about protein is it comes back together when you cook it. And now I'm going to start my spätzle. Spätzle is the correct pronunciation. And my water is boiling. Let me tell you, when I make this at home, and I make it a lot when my son Sam is home, he loves it. I have to make vast amounts of it. Fresh pasta, as I said. When I make it at home, here's the routine. I put the pot of water on, and I generally use a larger pot than this even, and it takes, as long as it takes for the water to come to a boil, it takes to make the batter. The batter's that simple. So we're going to start with 2 eggs. You can do this, it's a little faster and easier with electric mixer, but I like to pretend I'm in a country kitchen in Germany, you know, with a wooden spoon, you know, whisking it by hand while the fields are turning orange at the end of the day. You know, it's sort of fun to do things by hand. Okay, so 2 eggs. And then I'm gonna add some salt and water. And it's interesting because the recipe says 2/3 of a cup water. I almost always end up using at least a cup because what we want to end up with, the batter should be the consistency of thin pancake batter. But so I don't forget, I'm going to add a little bit of nutmeg here too. And nutmeg, you know, I was trying to figure out why it's so traditional in here. I couldn't come up with an answer. It's just part of the recipe. It's part of spätzle. It's what they add. It seems unusual. Okay. So now I'm going to add 2 cups of flour. This is so much fun. I mean, it's like, if you've ever made fresh pasta, you know, the Italian way, this is a much more sort of happy-go-lucky pasta. It's free form. It ends up in like little pellets, little bits of pasta. And it's absolutely delicious, and it's no different than any other fresh pasta. Stir this up. That's basically it. I'm gonna see what the texture looks like. And you just wanna mix it till it's fairly smooth. It really doesn't matter if there's a few lumps in there. And what I want is for it to drip from my spoon like it's doing right now. And interestingly enough, I don't know if there's any science to this, but my dad taught me that when you have something really starchy like this, the way to clean this bowl is to put cold water in there, not hot, and let it soak. And then it's a lot easier to clean afterwards. All right, salt, you need the water to be very well salted. Here is a spätzle maker. It's a funny looking tool. You lay the whole thing on top, okay, and then you pour the dough into the holder, and it drips down. You fill it up quickly, more quickly than I did, and it drips down underneath, and then you move it back and forth slowly, which makes the pasta go down into the pan. Isn't that fun? Magic trick. So later on, I'm gonna wash this all in cold water, soak it in cold water. Stir your pasta just like you always do. Now, this is gonna take about, I don't know, 3-4 minutes. We're good to go. While that just boils for another minute, and I'm gonna keep a good eyeball on it because it has a tendency to come up over the top, I'm gonna come down and set up some more for my pork. Get my pan going here. Okay, so just some all-purpose flour, and then I'm gonna season my meat. I used to season the flour, and finally I decided, no, it's better to season the meat. Get this out of the way. Rinse off my hands while I sprinkle salt. Okay, I'm gonna keep, that's just about there. You know, I'm gonna pause for half a second and take a taste and see how we're doing. Sometimes they say just let it float. I just don't, and then it's ready. It floated right away. That's done. That's really good. Isn't that a magic trick? Can you imagine making fresh pasta on a weeknight? You really can if you have the spätzle maker. Okay, I'm gonna drain this. Spätzle facial. Okay, back into the pot. This is wonderful with sautéed wild mushrooms, you know, with all sorts of herbs, with Parmesan cheese, with a little bit of chicken broth. I'm just gonna put a couple tablespoons of butter in there and let it melt. Put the lid on and leave it alone till the pork is done. Okay, seasoning the pork. Now we're gonna flour the pork. I flour almost all meats that are very tender and delicate. White meat chicken, pork, and veal. Oil in the pan, about 2 tablespoons. And you flour the meat right before you put it in the pan, because if I floured it ahead of time and let it sit, the flour would become all gummy and stick to the pork. And this also will give it a nice crust. Let's see if it makes the right noise. That's the noise you want to hear. Ooh, these are just gonna fit. You don't wanna crowd them. You know, there's like 2 minutes in the pan, maybe 2 minutes aside. No, maybe not even that. Let's see, it's very quick on the second side. That already looks good, doesn't it? And now I'm gonna get this last guy out and quickly get my shallots in. And the shallots are gonna add sort of, it's like caramelized onions. Shallots are in the same family. Very quickly, we're just going to get some color on them. And I'm going to go get the rest of the ingredients for my sauce. But first, we're going to add some white wine. Let me get my spices in there. 1.5 tablespoons of paprika. This is Hungarian paprika. And 1 tablespoon of caraway. Okay, and we're just going to blossom these spices. Now, it's very interesting. Paprika is considered the national spice of Hungary. And it's a wonderful spice, and it's made from peppers, and they're harvested and dried and ground. There's apparently 8 different grades of paprika, ranging from sweet to quite spicy. Okay, in goes our chicken broth. And we're just gonna get all that loosened up, bring it back up to a boil, reduce it a tiny bit, and I'm gonna chop some chives for my spätzle while I wait. I love chives. They're like little tiny scallion tops or potent onions. Okay, I'm gonna put my pork back in there and it's gonna thicken it. I'm gonna try not to let it boil. Protein does not like being boiled. It makes it tough. You see there's a little bit of juice left on this plate, not a ton, but you don't wanna waste that. That's really good stuff. And I'm sorry I didn't pause to show you the brown stuff at the bottom of the pan, but that's something called fond, F-O-N-D. But what it is the brown bits that come from the meat when you saute them. And I've sort of created a monster in my husband in that, let's say I'm making a dish and I just decided, I'm just gonna saute some pork chops. I'm not gonna do anything else with them. And I take them out to let them rest, which I always do before I serve them. And he walks by and he sees all those brown bits in the bottom of the pan. And he'll say to me, are you gonna leave that in there? Aren't you gonna do something with that? And so of course I then have to make a quick pan sauce. Okay, let me finish off my spätzle. I'm gonna put it in my bowl and top it off with some chives. This is great comfort food, on a night when you're feeling a little sad. Okay, so great with Parmesan cheese too. Now I've re-thickened this a little bit. I'm gonna measure about 1/4 cup of sour cream, which is the last thing that's gonna go in there. Okay, but the pork's gonna go back in just to get it coated. Oh, I wish you could smell this because this is really good Hungarian paprika and it makes such a difference. Certainly this glows in the dark now, doesn't it? Okay. And you could do 1 or 2 pieces per person. I think I'll do 2. Chives would be nice on this too, but we don't need to put green things on everything on the same plate. So you see how thick this got. And I didn't add any thickener. The only thing that thickened it was the flour that was on the pork. Alrighty, there we go. My Hungarian pork cutlets. I hope that you will take this model of quick saute and quick pan sauce and just completely run with it. Paul Prudhomme made Blackened Fish very famous in the 80s, and I loved it so much. It was a wonderful New Orleans dish that I decided to come up with my own version. So I have 3 rules about it. Find the thinnest fish you can, start with the hottest pan, and preferably use a cast iron pan. But let's start by talking about the fish. Now, when I first came up with this recipe, I used sole, and the reason I liked it is it's so thin. And there's some sole that you can find that's sustainable, but not all is. So I've switched to something that's nationally sustainable, which is tilapia. Now the problem with tilapia is half of it is very thin, but the other half of it is quite thick. So here's my solution. I freeze it, I've got some here that I froze, for about 20 minutes. And then it's easy to cut the fat part in half. The reason we freeze it, anytime you freeze any protein, it firms up. And it's just firm enough that you can cut it easily without hurting yourself. Here, I'll just show you one of these guys because I've already got some done. So you get down at the level of the fish so that you can see exactly where you are. I can see that I'm about a ½ inch in. And you just be very careful and take your time. And then you see you end up with 2 pieces that are a lot thinner. And the reason I like the fish to be thin, because it's all about the crust. You want a lot of crust in relation to the fish. So the thicker pieces you cut in half, and the thinner pieces of the tilapia, remember I said there's 2 parts, you just put them in straight up. Okay, now that I've got my fish ready to go, I'm actually going to soak it in milk. Why milk? Milk is a deodorizer. Even fish that's not all that fishy becomes less fishy when you soak it in milk. Okay, so I've got some that I've soaked. You do it for at least a ½ an hour, and you can do it longer than that, even up to a whole day. There we go. Here's some I've been soaking. So that is ready to go in just a minute, and I'm gonna meanwhile get started on my side dish, which is grated zucchini. I love using the grating disc of my food processor. It just does such fast work on grating things. And also, if you can grate it quickly like this, and not on the coarse side of a 4-sided grater, you save your fingers. You know how when you use one of those graters, the 4-sided graters, a little bit of you goes into every dish. Okay, I'm gonna do one at a time here. Oh, did I mention how much fun this is to do when the kids have been acting up today, or you've had a bad day at the office? The reason I'm grating the zucchini is so that I can get them smaller, they'll cook faster, but also I'm then gonna salt them. It's very funny. For years, I thought zucchini was the most boring vegetable on the planet. What makes it boring is all the water in it. So we wanna lose the water. Guess what? Underneath all that water, zucchini has the most wonderful, intense, sweet zucchini flavor. So I'm gonna topple this into a colander here, and we're gonna add some salt. It only takes about 15 minutes to drain. Look at how beautifully that's been grated. If I did that by hand, I would be grating for the next 20 minutes. Let me just get a little salt. We're gonna add about 1.5 teaspoons. And it's amazing how quickly this goes down in volume after you toss it with the salt. And it gives off so much liquid, you're like, wow, who knew that zucchini were so full of it? Okay, let me show you now. This is gonna sound so like, oh, yawn, I've done that. How to slice an onion. And when I say how to slice an onion, there's several ways you could slice it, but there's only one correct way. You could slice the onion this way, or you could slice the onion following the ribs. It literally shows you what to do. Years ago, I was lucky enough to be working with Julia Child. For a while there, I couldn't work with her and we needed a replacement. And I brought in a friend of mine who was actually a very accomplished chef. And let me get my heat on, actually. And Julia was sort of testing her out and testing everybody out to see, you know, what she thought of them. Here goes some oil, olive oil, extra virgin. And my friend didn't slice the onion the way I am. She sliced it crosswise. Based on that, Julia didn't hire her. Oh, this is the right way. I'm not quite sure why. You're wondering why? It just makes sense and gets you, I guess, the best pieces. I'm gonna get this in the pan. Let me crank this up a bit. We're gonna get some color on these guys and a pinch of salt. It's a good idea to season as you go. All right, time to make our famous blackened spice mix. So we're gonna start with a tablespoon each. This is hot paprika and garlic powder. And it's a great mixture to make and have in-house. And then we need 1.5 teaspoons of oregano, thyme, cayenne, onion powder, and black pepper. Okay, so 1.5 teaspoons of the thyme, of the cayenne. This is spicy. And you notice how bright red that cayenne is? That indicates to me that it's very fresh. Spices lose their color as they get older. Black pepper, freshly ground. Sort of looks like a kindergarten art class, huh? With all these colors. And that is it. I'm gonna just mix this up. And that's all that's involved. Oh, you know, I think there's a little bit of salt goes in there too. Here we go. Mix it up well so you don't get all cayenne in one bite. Okay, 3 tablespoons. And this will keep for several months. You want to keep all your spices in a cool, dark place. And they certainly don't go bad, they just get less strong. To this spice mix, I am going to add 3/4 of a cup of all-purpose flour. Now, the reason I have this set up this way is because I like to use the parchment paper to toss the fish around. Good old all-purpose. About another teaspoon of salt. And we're using kosher salt. It's coarse, it's easy to measure. That tastes awfully good, just even like that. All right, my onions are getting somewhere. And I need to get the rest of the ingredients ready for my zucchini. So we're going to zest a little lemon. Lemon rind is one of my all-time favorite ingredients. I'm going to add some. We already have a few thyme leaves that came off here. And thyme is very nice with zucchini. Okay, here we go. Now, a little bit of juice with my favorite juicer. There we go. So I've got all my flavorings ready. I'm going to go squeeze my zucchini. So look at all of that liquid. Wow, and that's not all. There's even more that's going to come out. I'm going to squeeze it right into the sink. And what we're doing is concentrating the flavor of the zucchini. Look at that. Whoa! Okay, now let me show you what we ended up with. You remember what we started with. Now, isn't that ridiculous how much it squeezes down? It's like, it's so sad, but don't worry, it's so tasty, it's worth it. So in this goes with our onions. Let's dump it in. And it really, at this point, only takes a few minutes. So it gives us just enough time to cook our fish. And I've been heating my cast iron skillet, but I have to warn you, once you get to the point where you add the fish, you're going to get some, smoke coming up a little bit from the spices. So I'm going to start flouring my fish. And let me just say that when you flour your fish, you want to do it the last minute. I generally end up flouring myself too, but this is a good trick I learned in restaurants. And then I'll get my oil in the pan, and I'm using vegetable oil, and then right after that, in goes my fish. You don't need a ton, particularly if your cast iron skillet is well seasoned. Okay, here we go. It's not making a lot of noise, but it is smoking, so I know we're okay. All right. So while that cooks on the first side, I am going to go add the seasonings to my zucchini. There goes our lemon rind, the juice. We know we don't need any salt because we've got lots of salt in there. And then you just need to taste it and make sure it's the way you like it. And see, it keeps its nice green color. Okay, back to here. Now, when you want to flip the fish, get all the oil to the end of the pan where you are not. All right, so the way you know it's done is you take the thin tip of a knife and you go down. I know this is going to be done because it's so thin. And if it goes through with no resistance, then you know it's done. This, oh, actually, that's pretty good. Okay, I think we're ready to take them all out. Let me just put a couple pieces on here. All right. Let me get this off the heat. And let me serve up the rest of our dishes here. Our beautiful zucchini. Wonderfully hot. Really, my kids didn't used to like zucchini when they were little, and after I did this, they completely got on board. Some yummy smashed potatoes, a few lemon wedges. So you see how easy that was? I mean, that took less than 15 minutes. So, wow, I'm gonna go have a yummy dinner. Wow, that looks so delicious. So what would you serve this with? Well, you want a fruity Riesling. You want a wine that has a little bit of sugar in it. Sugar counterbalances chilies and spiciness. So we're gonna have a Riesling. And then I have a homemade tartar sauce. The recipe's on the website. And it's so much better than that stuff in a jar because that stuff in the jar has all sorts of additives and all sorts of extra sugar. You don't want it. So there you go, so simple. You know, with the right pan and the right preparation, you'll be astonished how quick these sautés go. And you know what? They're of superb restaurant quality. I'm Sara Moulton. I'll see you next time on Sara's Weeknight Meals. Sara's Weeknight Meals continues online. For recipes, helpful tips, messages, and lots more, visit us on the web at saramoulton.com/weeknightmeals. Funding provided by
Family owned and Indiana grown, Maple Leaf Farms is a proud sponsor of Sara's Weeknight Meals. Providing a variety of duck products for home kitchens, Maple Leaf Farms Duck helps inspire culinary adventures everywhere. Maple Leaf Farms.
Subaru builds vehicles like the versatile Subaru Forester with symmetrical all-wheel drive and plenty of cargo room. A recipe made for whatever the day brings. Subaru, a proud sponsor of Sara's Weeknight Meals.
Ezra's Feta Cheese, family made for more than a century.